The scorching sun beat down on Emma Vance's weathered cabin as she wiped sweat from her brow, staring at the nearly empty cupboard with desperation in her eyes. 3 hungry children waited at the table, their hopeful faces crushing her spirit more than any hardship the Montana Territory of 1875 had thrown at her. Emma had been fighting a losing battle since her husband Thomas died 6 months ago, leaving her alone with their children on their small homestead, 10 miles outside of Willow Creek. At 32, she had aged a decade and half a year, her once vibrant auburn hair now dulled and her green eyes permanently shadowed with exhaustion. She pulled out the last remnants of flour and beans, mentally calculating how to stretch them for another day. Her youngest, 4-year-old Samuel, tugged at her skirt. "I'm hungry, Mama," he whimpered. "I know, sweetheart," she soothed, running her fingers through his sandy hair. "Dinner will be ready soon." 8-year-old Mary and 10-year-old John exchanged knowing glances. They were old enough to understand their dire circumstances. Emma mixed the flour with water, making a thin gruel. As she stirred the pot over the modest fire, a knock at the door startled her. Visitors were rare this far out. "Stay here," she instructed the children as she approached the door cautiously. Opening it revealed a tall man in dusty riding clothes, his broad shoulders filling the doorframe and a well-worn cowboy hat in his hands. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice deep and surprisingly gentle. "Name's Daniel Kent. My horse threw a shoe about a mile back, wondering if I might trouble you for some water while I rest him." Emma hesitated. Strangers could be dangerous, but there was something sincere in his blue eyes that put her slightly at ease. Plus, she couldn't turn away someone in need, even in her circumstances. "Of course," she replied, stepping aside. "There's a pump out back." "Much obliged," he said, nodding respectfully as he entered. Daniel's gaze swept over the humble cabin, taking in the 3 wide-eyed children at the table and the meager pot bubbling over the fire. He was a man who noticed details that came with the territory when you'd spent years driving cattle across the frontier. At 35, he'd seen his share of hardship, but the quiet dignity of this family struggling to survive touched something deep within him. "This is Mary, John, and Samuel," Emma introduced when the children's staring became obvious. Daniel smiled warmly at them. "Pleased to meet you all." He turned to Emma. "And you are?" "Emma Vance," she replied, returning to her cooking. "You folks been out here long?" Daniel asked, attempting conversation as he accepted a tin cup of water from her. 3 years, she answered briefly, stirring the thin gruel and avoiding his eyes. She didn't want to see pity there. Daniel watched as she ladled small portions into 4 bowls. The children's eyes followed each movement with undisguised hunger. When Emma set the food before them, she whispered a quick blessing before the children began to eat slowly, obviously trying to savor each bite of the insufficient meal. Emma sat with them but didn't take any for herself. Instead, she sipped water, pretending it was enough. "Aren't you eating, Mama?" Samuel asked innocently. "I'm not very hungry tonight," she lied, her stomach betraying her with a quiet growl. Daniel set his cup down with quiet determination. He'd seen enough. "I've got provisions on my horse," he said. "Would you allow me to contribute to your table as thanks for the water and rest?" Emma's pride warred with necessity. "That's kind, but unnecessary." "I insist," Daniel replied, already heading for the door. "It's trail custom never refuse hospitality without giving something in return." Before Emma could protest further, Daniel was back with a canvas sack. From it, he produced dried beef, a small sack of beans, coffee, and even a precious tin of peaches. The children's eyes widened at the sight of such bounty. Emma felt tears threatening but blinked them back. "This is too much," she said softly. Daniel set the food on the table. "Please," he said simply. "There's plenty to share." Emma reluctantly accepted his offering, adding the dried beef to the pot with some of the beans. Soon, the cabin filled with a hearty aroma that had been absent for weeks. As they ate the improved meal together, Daniel respectfully asked about their situation. Bit by bit, Emma revealed their story: how Thomas had died of pneumonia after getting caught in a blizzard, how they were struggling to maintain the small cattle herd and crops, how the bank was threatening to take their land if the next payment wasn't made. "I can barely feed them," she said finally, her voice breaking as she looked at her children, now happily enjoying the peaches. "Some days I don't know how we'll survive another month." Daniel studied her for a long moment, admiring her strength and dignity despite everything. Then he spoke words that would change all their lives. "Then you'll eat beside me from now on," he said with quiet certainty. Emma's head snapped up, confusion in her eyes. "I don't understand." "I'm proposing a partnership, Mrs. Vance," Daniel explained. "I've been looking for land to settle on after years of driving other men's cattle. I've got savings and experience. You've got land that needs working and children who need feeding." "You're suggesting—" "What exactly?" Emma asked cautiously. "I'll stay, help with the ranch, get your herd healthy again, and ensure you make your bank payments. In return, I get a share of the profits once we're on our feet and a place to finally call home." Emma studied him suspiciously. "Why would you do this for strangers?" Daniel's weathered face softened. "Because I've been alone too long, and I recognize good people when I see them. This is business, Mrs. Vance, a mutually beneficial arrangement." Emma glanced at her children, who were watching the conversation with hope in their eyes for the first time in months. "I'll need to think about it," she said finally. "Of course," Daniel nodded, respecting her caution. "I'll camp by your barn tonight and we can talk more tomorrow. No obligation." That night, after the children were asleep, Emma sat by the dying fire, turning over Daniel's proposition. She had few options left. The bank wouldn't wait much longer, and winter would come again before she knew it. Could she trust this stranger? Yet something in his steady gaze told her he was a man of his word. Morning came with Emma's decision. She found Daniel already at work mending a broken fence post. "1 month," she said without preamble. "We'll try this arrangement for 1 month and then decide whether to continue." Daniel smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Fair enough. I'll fetch my things from town tomorrow." True to his word, Daniel returned the next day with his modest belongings and immediately set to work. He examined the cattle herd down to just 15 head and frowned at their condition. "They need better grazing," he told Emma. "That south pasture has good grass, but your fence is down." Together they worked to repair the fence, Emma matching him in determination if not in strength. By nightfall, her muscles ached, but there was satisfaction in seeing actual progress. Daniel proved to be a man who understood boundaries. He made his bed in the barn, joined them for meals, but otherwise gave Emma and the children space. He taught John about cattle, showed Mary how to better tend the vegetable garden, and always had a moment to swing Samuel onto his shoulders. With each passing day, color returned to the children's cheeks as regular meals became the norm again. Daniel had connections from his cattle driving days and managed to negotiate better prices for their beef than Emma had ever secured. By the 3rd week, Emma realized she was watching for Daniel each morning, finding comfort in his steady presence around the homestead. He never complained, never criticized how she'd been managing, only suggested improvements with respect. One evening, as they sat on the porch after the children were asleep, Emma finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Why aren't you settled with a family of your own, Mr. Kent? A man with your capabilities could have established himself long ago. Daniel was quiet for so long that Emma thought he might not answer. I had dreams of it, he finally said, staring out at the darkening land. There was someone once back in Kansas. Sarah was her name. We were to be married, had land picked out and everything. He paused and Emma waited patiently. Cholera took her and her entire family in '68. After that, I couldn't stay there. Took to the trails driving cattle. Figured I'd do that until old age claimed me. I'm sorry, Emma said softly, understanding loss all too well. Life has its own plans, Daniel replied. Found myself thinking more about settling down these past couple years. A man gets tired of sleeping under the stars every night. As the month drew to a close, Emma no longer questioned whether the arrangement should continue. Daniel had proven himself invaluable, honest, and respectful. The bank payment had been made on time, the cattle were thriving, and the children blossomed under his kind attention. But something else had grown too, something Emma wasn't ready to acknowledge, even to herself. The way her heart quickened when Daniel smiled at her, how she found herself fixing her hair before supper, the comfortable silences they shared in the evenings. The day marking 1 month since their agreement came bright and clear. Daniel found Emma by the corral, watching as John confidently led one of the calves around as Daniel had taught him. Our month is up, Mrs. Vance, he said, leaning on the fence beside her. Have you decided if our arrangement should continue? Emma looked at him directly, noting the hope barely concealed in his eyes. I believe it should, she said. The children are happier than they've been in months. The ranch is improving. It would be foolish to end something that's working so well. Relief crossed Daniel's face. I'm glad to hear it. But, Emma continued, I think we need clearer terms. This is still my land, my home. I need to know your intentions going forward. My intentions are exactly as I stated, Daniel replied earnestly. To help build this place into something that can sustain all of you, and hopefully provide me with a permanent home in the process. Emma nodded, satisfied with his answer for now. Then we continue. Summer progressed into early autumn. The first harvest under their partnership yielded better than Emma had dared hope. Daniel's work on the irrigation system had made all the difference for their crops, and the cattle were healthy enough that they could sell 5 head at excellent prices. One bright September afternoon, they rode into Willow Creek together to purchase supplies and deposit money in the bank. It was the first time Emma had been to town in months. Mrs. Vance, Mr. Peterson, the banker, greeted her with new respect in his voice. Your ranch appears to be making quite a recovery. Mr. Kent must be a positive influence. We've formed a successful partnership, Emma replied neutrally, though she couldn't help but notice the curious glances from townspeople seeing her with Daniel. After banking their money, Daniel suggested they treat the children to a proper meal at the town's small restaurant. As they walked down the main street, Emma suddenly stopped, her face paling. What is it? Daniel asked, concerned. Victor Wallace, she whispered, nodding toward a well-dressed man exiting the general store. He's the largest rancher in the county. He tried to buy our land after Thomas died, offered a pittance. When I refused, he warned me I'd come begging eventually. Daniel's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Wallace spotted them and approached, his smile not reaching his eyes. Mrs. Vance, what a surprise, he said smoothly. I heard rumors you'd taken in a drifter to help with your difficulties. His gaze slid to Daniel with thinly veiled disdain. Mr. Kent is my business partner, Emma corrected firmly. And we're doing quite well, thank you. Wallace raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Well, my offer still stands when reality sets in again. Good day. As he walked away, Daniel placed a gentle hand on Emma's back. Men like that only understand strength. We'll show him what this ranch can become." Emma felt a surge of determination, bolstered by Daniel's confidence. "Yes, we will." That evening, after returning home and putting the children to bed, Emma found Daniel on the porch, smoking a cigarette and staring at the stars. "Thank you," she said simply, sitting beside him. "For what?" he asked. "For today. For standing beside me in town, for giving me back my dignity." Daniel extinguished his cigarette. "You never lost your dignity, Emma. You fought harder than anyone I know." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice made her heart flutter unexpectedly. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped here that day," she admitted. "I believe some things are meant to be," Daniel replied softly. "I'd been riding aimlessly for weeks, no destination in mind. Something led me here." Their eyes met in the moonlight, and for a moment, Emma thought he might reach for her hand. Instead, he respectfully stood. "It's getting late." "Good night, Emma." "Good night, Daniel," she whispered as he walked toward the barn. As autumn deepened, so did their connection. Daniel began teaching Emma to shoot properly, standing behind her to correct her aim, his presence warm and solid at her back. She taught him to make her mother's apple pie when they harvested fruit from the small orchard. The children increasingly turned to Daniel for guidance and approval, and he gave it with genuine affection. One crisp October morning, Daniel rode out to check the herd and didn't return by sundown. Emma tried to quell her rising panic as she paced the porch, watching the road. When darkness fell completely with no sign of him, she made a decision. "Mary, watch your brothers," she instructed, grabbing Thomas's old rifle. "I'm going to find Daniel." She saddled her mare with shaking hands, praying silently as she rode out following the path to the north pasture. The moon provided just enough light to see the trail. After 20 minutes of riding, she heard a low moan from a gully beside the path. "Daniel," she called, dismounting quickly. She found him at the bottom of the shallow ravine, conscious but clearly injured. His horse was nowhere to be seen. "Emma," he grunted, attempting to sit up, "you shouldn't be out here alone." "Hush," she scolded, kneeling beside him. "What happened?" "Snake spooked my horse," he explained through gritted teeth. "Threw me, think my leg's broken." Emma assessed the situation quickly. "Can you ride if I help you up?" Daniel nodded grimly. With considerable effort and pain, Emma managed to help him onto her horse, then mounted behind him. The ride home was slow and painful for Daniel, but he never complained once. At the cabin, she helped him inside and sent John to fetch Dr. Miller from town. While they waited, Emma cut away Daniel's pant leg to reveal an ugly break, the bone not quite puncturing the skin but visibly misaligned. "This is going to hurt," she warned as she cleaned the wound. Daniel's only response was a sharp intake of breath as she worked. His stoicism moved her deeply, this strong man who had come into their lives and changed everything, now vulnerable in her care. When Dr. Miller finally arrived near midnight, he confirmed Emma's assessment, a clean break that needed setting. The doctor administered whiskey for the pain, then looked to Emma. "I'll need your help holding him steady, Mrs. Vance." Without hesitation, Emma positioned herself at Daniel's shoulders, her hands firm but gentle. Their eyes met as the doctor prepared to set the bone. "I trust you," Daniel whispered, and in that moment, Emma knew her feelings had grown far beyond partnership or friendship. The bone setting was brutal, but Daniel remained conscious throughout, his hand finding Emma's and squeezing tightly. "When it was done, Dr. Miller splinted the leg and gave instructions for care. "He'll need to stay off it for at least 6 weeks, the doctor said. "No riding, no ranch work." After he left, Emma faced a new dilemma. Daniel couldn't possibly stay in the barn now, but the cabin had limited space. "You'll take my bed," she decided. "I'll sleep with Mary." "I can't put you out of your own bed," Daniel protested weakly, the whiskey and pain making his words slightly slurred. "You're not putting me anywhere." "I'm deciding where you'll recover fastest," Emma replied in a tone that brooked no argument. With John's help, they managed to get Daniel settled in her room. The following days established a new routine. Emma took on Daniel's outdoor chores in addition to her own, while he frustrated himself with forced inactivity. To keep him from falling into melancholy, Emma brought her mending to his room in the evenings, and they talked for hours about their lives, dreams, and regrets. "I never thanked Thomas enough," she confessed one night, "for bringing me out here, for believing we could build something. I complained about the hardships instead of seeing the beauty." Daniel watched her in the lamplight, her hands busy with needlework. He knew Emma. A man knows when he's loved, even when the words aren't perfect. She looked up, finding his gaze intense. "Is that true?" "It is," he said softly. "Just as I know the children love me, though they've never said it outright. Some things don't need saying to be understood." Emma's heart raced at the implication behind his words. "And some things perhaps should be said, even so," she ventured. Before Daniel could respond, Samuel came running in with a nightmare, and the moment passed. But something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of deeper feelings neither was quite ready to name. As Daniel's leg healed, winter arrived with a vengeance. Emma worried about managing everything alone in the harsh weather, but neighbors who had largely ignored them before now appeared to help. Drawn by stories of the ranch's revival and Daniel's reputation as a fair dealer. By December, Daniel could move with crutches, insisting on contributing despite his limitations. He took over the bookkeeping, discovering ways to stretch their resources even further. In the evenings, he entertained the children with stories of his travels while Emma cooked, and secretly enjoyed his deep voice filling her home with warmth. Christmas approached, bringing both joy and melancholy. It would be the children's second Christmas without their father, and despite their improved circumstances, Emma felt the absence keenly. Daniel sensed her mood and quietly began preparations to make the holiday special. When Emma and the children returned from gathering evergreen boughs for decorating, they found the cabin transformed. Daniel had somehow managed to hang paper chains and ornaments made from tin cans and bits of colored glass. A small pile of packages wrapped in brown paper sat beneath the modest tree John had cut down. "How did you manage all this?" Emma asked in astonishment. Daniel smiled, leaning on his crutch. "I have my ways, and some help from Mrs. Peterson in town." On Christmas Eve, after a simple but satisfying dinner, Daniel produced a fiddle no one knew he owned. He played softly at first, then with growing confidence as the children clapped along. Emma watched him, this man who had brought music back into their home, and felt her heart overflow. When the children were finally asleep, drunk on excitement for the morning, Emma and Daniel sat before the fire, finishing the preparations. She had knitted him a scarf in secret moments. He had carved wooden toys for the children. "I have something for you," Daniel said, reaching into his pocket. "It's not much, but—" He handed her a small package. Inside was a silver locket, simple but lovely. "Daniel, I can't accept this," she breathed, though her fingers caressed the metal reverently. "You can," he insisted. "Open it." Inside was a tiny portrait of her 3 children, their faces rendered with surprising skill. "How did you?" "Mrs. Peterson's husband is handy with miniatures. I sent him a description." Daniel looked uncertain for the first time since she'd known him. "Do you like it?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "It's the most thoughtful gift I've ever received." Acting on impulse, she leaned forward and kissed his cheek softly. As she began to pull away, Daniel's hand came up to gently cup her face. Their eyes met, a question in his. Emma answered by closing the distance between them. Their first kiss was tentative, sweet, and over too quickly as Emma suddenly pulled back, confusion and guilt washing over her. "I'm sorry," she said, standing abruptly. "I shouldn't have." "Emma," Daniel interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "Don't apologize for something we both wanted." She looked at him, this man who had become so essential to her existence. "I feel like I'm betraying Thomas." Daniel nodded in understanding. "I would never ask you to forget him. He gave you those beautiful children, this home. But he wouldn't want you to stop living, Emma." "How can you be sure?" she whispered. "Because if I loved someone as he loved you, I'd want her happiness above all else." He reached for her hand. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. Just know that I'm here, and my feelings run deeper than partnership." Emma squeezed his hand, not trusting herself to speak. Instead, she helped him to his room, pausing at the doorway. "Merry Christmas, Daniel," she said softly. "Merry Christmas, Emma," he replied, his eyes conveying what words could not yet express. Christmas Day brought joy to the cabin, with the children delighting in their simple gifts and the special breakfast Emma prepared. Daniel watched the family celebration with contentment, no longer feeling like an outsider but not quite belonging fully either. He knew Emma needed time, and he was prepared to wait. As winter deepened, the close quarters of the cabin brought them all closer. By February, Daniel's leg had healed enough for him to move back to the barn, but a blizzard struck the night before he planned to relocate, making it impossible. Instead, he continued sleeping on a pallet by the fire, a situation both comfortable and increasingly charged with unspoken feelings. One stormy night after the children were asleep, Emma found herself sitting beside Daniel, watching the flames dance. Neither spoke for a long while, content in the shared silence. When Daniel's hand found hers in the firelight, she didn't pull away. "I never expected this," she admitted quietly. "What?" he asked. "To feel this way again, to want a future that includes." She hesitated, then finished. "That includes love." Daniel's fingers tightened around hers. "I never expected it either, but here we are." Emma turned to face him fully. "The children adore you." "And I them," he replied sincerely. "They're remarkable, Emma. You've raised them with such strength and kindness despite everything. If something were to happen between us," she began cautiously, "would you be content with another man's children, never having your own?" Daniel's expression grew serious. "Emma, I stopped thinking of them as another man's children months ago. They're part of you and I love them for themselves. As for having more—" He paused, a flush rising on his weathered cheeks. "I would be blessed to raise a family with you, whether that includes more children or not." Emma's heart pounded as she realized what he was truly saying. "Daniel, are you—" "I love you, Emma," he said simply. "I think I have since that first day, when you were trying so hard to feed your children on nothing but water and flour, yet still offered hospitality to a stranger." Tears filled Emma's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered, the words both frightening and freeing. "I've been fighting it, feeling disloyal to Thomas's memory. But love isn't something you can fight forever." Daniel finished for her, brushing away a tear from her cheek with his thumb. This time when they kissed, there was no hesitation, only the certainty of two people who had found something rare and precious in the most unexpected circumstances. Spring arrived early that year, bringing new growth to the land and new possibilities for the future. Daniel formally proposed one evening after supper, kneeling despite his still tender leg, presenting Emma with a simple gold band he'd purchased in town. "I don't have much to offer except my heart and my hands," he said, looking up at her with those steady blue eyes. but everything I am is yours if you'll have me." "Yes," Emma answered without hesitation, her voice strong and clear. The children erupted in cheers, having been secretly informed of Daniel's intentions beforehand. John shook Daniel's hand solemnly, Mary hugged him tightly, and little Samuel asked innocently if this meant he could call Daniel Pa now. "I'd be honored," Daniel replied, his voice rough with emotion. They were married in May, a simple ceremony in the town church with half the county in attendance. Emma wore a new blue dress, and Daniel looked almost unrecognizable in his store-bought suit. The children stood proudly beside them as they spoke their vows. Victor Wallace watched from the back of the church, his expression unreadable as the community celebrated the union of the woman he'd expected to beg for his help, and the drifter who had helped her thrive instead. Summer found the Kent family, as they were now known, prospering beyond Emma's wildest dreams. The cattle herd had tripled, the crops were thriving, and they had hired 2 hands to help with the increased workload. Daniel proved to be as good a husband as he was a rancher, treating Emma with unwavering respect and tenderness. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Daniel's arm around Emma's shoulders, she shared news she had been keeping for several days. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday," she said, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "We'll welcome a new Kent in winter." Daniel's face transformed with wonder and joy. He gathered her close, whispering words of love and gratitude against her hair. Later that night, they told the children, who received the news with excitement and 1,000 questions. The following months brought changes large and small. They expanded the cabin, adding 2 new rooms with Daniel's carpentry skills. Emma's pregnancy progressed smoothly, bringing a glow to her cheeks that made Daniel fall in love with her all over again each morning. In October, Victor Wallace approached them at the Harvest Festival, his usual arrogance tempered with grudging respect. "Kent," he acknowledged Daniel. "Mrs. Kent." "I understand congratulations are in order." "Thank you," Emma replied civilly, one hand resting on her prominent belly. "I'm looking to expand my cattle business," Wallace continued. "Might be interested in discussing a partnership. Your herd has some fine bloodlines I could use." Daniel and Emma exchanged glances, a whole conversation passing between them without words. "We appreciate the interest, Mr. Wallace," Daniel said carefully, "but we're not looking for partners at present. We're building something for our family's future." Wallace's jaw tightened momentarily before he nodded. "The offer stands if you reconsider." As he walked away, Emma squeezed Daniel's hand. "He's finally seeing us as equals." "He's seeing what I saw that first day," Daniel replied. "A family worth fighting for." In December, as the first snow blanketed the land, Emma gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. Daniel paced outside the bedroom during her labor, his fear giving way to overwhelming joy when Dr. Miller finally invited him in to meet his child. Rose had her mother's auburn hair and her father's blue eyes. Daniel cradled her with reverent hands, marveling at the perfection of her tiny fingers. The older children crowded around, instantly smitten with their baby sister. "She's beautiful," Daniel whispered, sitting carefully beside Emma on the bed. "Like her mother." Emma smiled tiredly. "She has your eyes, and your determination. She was certainly in a hurry to join us." That night, after the children had finally been coaxed to their own beds and Rose slept peacefully in her cradle, Daniel and Emma held each other close in the darkness. "Did you ever imagine, that day you rode up to our door, that this would be your life?" Emma asked softly. Daniel's hand stroked her hair gently. "No, I was just a lonely man with a lame horse and a vague sense that something was calling me here. And now Now I know exactly why I was meant to find this place, he said, kissing her forehead. To find you. To hear you say I can barely feed them, so I could answer, then you'll eat beside me from now on. Emma nestled closer to him. You've given us so much more than food, Daniel. You've given us hope, security, love. You've given me the same, he replied. A family, a purpose, a home. Outside, snow continued to fall softly on the prosperous ranch, covering the land that had once nearly broken Emma with its demands, but now provided abundantly for the family that worked it together. Inside, warmth and love filled every corner of the home. Daniel and Emma had built not just the physical structure, but the bonds between all of them. As Emma drifted toward sleep in her husband's arms, she whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought a hungry man with a lame horse to her door on the day she had nearly lost all hope. Some might call it chance or coincidence. Emma knew better. Some things, indeed, were meant to be. Years later, when Rose was 5 and joined by a brother named William, the Kent Ranch had become one of the most successful in the county. The children grew strong and capable, John already showing signs of the rancher he would become, Mary developing a talent for healing that suggested a future as a doctor, Samuel displaying his father's way with horses, and Rose inheriting her mother's quiet determination. Emma and Daniel worked side by side through each season, their partnership deepening with every challenge overcome and every joy shared. On the 10th anniversary of Daniel's arrival, they hosted a celebration for the entire community, opening their prosperous home to neighbors far and wide. As twilight fell and guests mingled in the large yard, Daniel found Emma standing alone by the old oak tree, watching their children play with the neighbors' children. "Happy?" he asked simply, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Emma leaned back against his solid strength, the safety she had come to rely on completely. "More than I ever thought possible." Daniel turned her in his arms, studying the face that had only grown more beautiful to him with the passing years. "You know, I never told you what made me stop at your cabin that day." "Your horse threw a shoe," Emma reminded him with a smile. Daniel shook his head slightly. "The horse was fine. I saw smoke from your chimney and something pulled me toward it." I had passed 3 other homesteads that day without stopping. Emma's eyes widened. "Why did you lie?" "I didn't think you'd welcome a man who stopped simply because he was lonely and something about your place called to him," Daniel admitted. "It sounded too much like fate, and I figured you were practical enough to dismiss such notions." Emma laughed softly. "I was practical, yes, but I've learned that some of the best things in life can't be explained by practicality." She touched his face tenderly. "I'm glad you listened to whatever called you here." "So am I," Daniel murmured, bending to kiss her as their children's laughter rang out across the prosperous land that had once known only hardship and now flourished with love.